My name is Jake Spurlock, and I'm here to talk about responsive theme development using Bootstrap. Has anybody heard of Bootstrap? Yay! Is anybody using Bootstrap? Yay! All right. I want to tell you a little story real quick. This is a picture that I took last Friday actually, as I flew over the Salt Flats. I live in Northern California in the Bay Area. And I was so excited to come out to WordCamp Salt Lake that I flew out a whole week early. And last Saturday morning, I was on Twitter, like ready to drive over to the U. And I'm like, why is nobody talking about WordCamp Salt Lake today? And it dawned on me then that I was a whole week early. So I flew back and then flew back last night. And so glad to be here today. There we go. All right, so Bootstrap is a sleek, intuitive, and powerful front-end framework for faster and easier web development. It is a project by a couple engineers from Twitter, actually. They said, hey, we're standardizing all of our assets on Twitter, and we want to make things on Twitter responsive. We want to make things easier to develop with. So why don't we just kind of bundle everything into, in essence, a style guide for the web? And what they did is they said, hey, these are all really great assets. So what if let's open source this and give this back to the community. Twitter's got a really great presence, sharing their tools and their projects. If you go to twitter.github.com, you can see a lot of their open source projects and the things that they've contributed to the open source community, and Bootstrap is one of those. And so that's what I want to talk about today. So first off, it's by nerds, for nerds, built to Twitter, and then it's made for everyone. So the goal with Bootstrap is that you can take your web designs that you're building, and for the case for this crowd, WordPress theme designs, build them once and then have them usable for all of the different applications. Desktop applications, including widescreen layouts, tablet layouts, and mobile applications as well. And in addition, what it does is it packs in a 12-column grid. Has anybody used grid layouts before? I'll be honest. I've heard of grid layouts, and I wanted to be a better developer. And so a couple of years ago, I was like, well, I'm going to just figure out how to use these grid layouts. And it's a really powerful tool that I kind of stumbled upon. I've used a bunch of them, and I've kind of settled on Bootstrap. So 12-column responsive grid, dozens of components, JavaScript plugins, typography, form controls, and even a web-based customizer to make Bootstrap your own. So does anybody know who Dave Weiner is? Does that name sound familiar? A couple of people. Dave Weiner, he's the guy who created RSS. Like, that's kind of his thing, and everybody knows what RSS is, right? So I've been following his blog for a lot of years, and he's actually the person that turned me on to Bootstrap. He talked about how he was taking all of his applications and bootstrapping them. And from a blog post that he did, he said that this is needed, desperately needed, is indicated by the incredible uptake of Bootstrap. I use it in all the server software I'm working on, and it shows through in the templating language I'm developing. So everyone uses it will find it's just there and works. Anytime you want to do a Bootstrap technique, nothing to do, no libraries to include. It's as if they were part of the hardware. Same approach that Apple took with the Mac OS in 1984. And I think this is what's really interesting. He said, and the gist of this argument that he's postulating is that the web needs its own standards. I mean, we have standards for the web. The web needs its own, what do they call it on Apple? It's like the HIG, the Human Interface Guidelines. Is that right? Does that sound familiar? So that's kind of what the web needs too. We need like a standard set of tools that you can just build with, and that you'll see it across many different websites, but it'll be the same. Buttons will look the same. Forms will look the same, and they'll all kind of match this same guideline. So you can have very different layouts and very different components, but at the core, there's some of these similar things that you see with the web. And that's what Bootstrap does very well. So to get started with Bootstrap, you got to start with HTML. This is what our basic framework HTML document looks like. There's a couple things that are a little different, and I'll highlight them. The first is doc type HTML. This needs to be an HTML5 document. And I know that there's lots of buzzwords, and I don't think there's really a big difference between HTML4, 5, XHTML, whatever. But for Bootstrap and for the accompanying JavaScript plugins, it needs to be doctype HTML, which makes it an HTML5 document. Also, we need to add a meta tag that sets the viewport. And it says width, device width, initial scale 1.0. Does anybody know what this means? A couple people. Anybody want an answer? I used to teach, so sorry, I'm used to asking questions. What that does, go ahead.
It basically takes up the entire screen of the user's view.
Right, and where this is particularly applicable is in mobile devices. So like, let's say you have an iPhone or an Android device or whatever. What it wants to do when it loads a web page is it sucks it down, and so you like get the entire page rendered onto your like iPhone or Android device, right? And then you double tap and it zooms in to fill the content area. But when you're set with device width initial scale 1, what it does is it says, well, okay, so your layout here is 940 pixels wide, but your phone is 320 pixels wide. So let's just display 320 pixels worth of content. So you'd have to scroll over to bring in the rest or something like that. And what that does is that allows you to be responsive. Now the next thing here is that to include a CSS file. So if we were doing just a total static website, we would say /CSS, but have all of your CSS in a directory. And then there's a bootstrap.css, and then there's a bootstrap-responsive.css. And what the responsive stuff does, it says, okay, here's all of the extra responsive things. Because there may be situations like on MakeScene where I work, where you don't have the time to fully roll out your mobile development, and so you strip out all the mobile, all of the responsive stuff out of Bootstrap and just use it like it is. So notice we also have bootstrap.min.css, and we also have a file down in the footer right below the closing body tag that says bootstrap.min.js. Now, if you want to, I'll get into this in a little bit, but Bootstrap has a whole bunch of JavaScript plugins. And if you say, well, I really want tabbable tabs, and I really want drop-down menus, but I don't need the slideshow plugin, and I don't need X, Y, and Z, you can actually pull that out and then recompile the JavaScript for just the tools that you need. Sorry.
I was just going to ask, I know Bootstrap has a ton of different CSS files. When you're actually deploying your site, do you combine all those things into one CSS file? Or
Yeah.
do you use all of them?
Yeah, no, you concatenate all of it.
How large are they? Are they CDN?
You could hotlink off the GitHub CDN if you wanted. I wouldn't encourage that, but you could do that. But they're not very big at all. Everything, like all the JavaScript and all the CSS, is under some small number.
So you could throw it in your own.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I do. That's what I do. Yeah. Now, good question. Since this is WordPress, rather than in your header.php and footer.php to include JavaScript and CSS, we can enqueue our scripts. Does everybody do this? Shame on you. Just kidding. So we can enqueue the script. Now, Bootstrap's JavaScript file requires jQuery. So what we do is we say wp enqueue script jQuery, wp enqueue script make Bootstrap. So I work for Make, so this is just a lot of code out of Make magazine. So here's our Bootstrap. We go and we get the file, and then we say it's dependent upon jQuery. Then we can say wp enqueue style, and this says grab our CSS/Bootstrap. So the way I do it at Make is that I keep the JavaScript and CSS files separate. Like I don't bring them in myself. Like I don't paste this into my style.css file. I just have them separate, and then they're concatenated together. That way I can update Bootstrap as needed without having to worry about my own changes that I'm doing to my style.css file. Yeah, and then we just say add action to wp enqueue scripts and enqueue that function. Pretty cool little function. A lot of people use it. Some people don't use it. Okay, now there is a grid layout. So a lot of people have used grid layouts. For the uninitiated, what Bootstrap allows you to do is to say, okay, I have a row of content, and I have like, let's say our normal kind of de facto web page layout is something that looks like this. We might have a header that spans the entire top, and then we have a content area, and then we have a sidebar on the right-hand side. So if I wanted to split that up into a, let's say an 8-column and a 4-column, I would say div class equals row, and then I would say div class equals span 8, and then div class equals span 4. And so that would give me one column that is 8 columns wide, and then another column, like my sidebar, that is 4 columns wide. And span 8 and span 4. Span 4 is like 300 pixels, and span 8 is 620 pixels, something like that. And so it gives you the proper layout for your normal website. So like if I wasn't using Bootstrap, I would have to say div ID equals content. And then in my CSS, I would say content equals 620 pixels, float left, sidebar equals 300 pixels, float left, and then have a clear fix down at the bottom of all of that, right? But this, you just say, there it is, and it works just because it's hooked into the CSS for that grid framework. Now, but because of this responsive nature, what happens is when you have these columns, as your content gets narrower, the columns shrink to different widths. So if I'm on a large display, so the default Bootstrap width is 940 pixels wide. So at that width, each column is 60 pixels wide. So span 8 is 620, something like that, with 20 pixels of padding and or margin, sorry. But if I'm on a large display, like let's say I'm at a, sitting on a 24-inch display or something, I can actually even see a wider layout. Excuse me, and the column width there is 70 pixels with 30 pixels of gutter width. And so it allows you to be responsive and say, well, okay, here's the same content, but the person looking at it has a much bigger display, so let me just kind of format that a little differently. Then we go into tablets. It goes down to 42 pixels with a 20 pixel gutter, and then once you go to the phones to tablets, where you're 767 pixels and narrower, it just says, okay, all of the columns are now 100% wide. So in the case back here of our basic layout, what it does is instead of saying this span 8 is 620 pixels wide or whatever, it says now it's just at 100%. And then my sidebar is also at 100%. So it'll like give my content, it'll just display my content full width in the iPhone or whatever, and then it'll display the sidebar just right below it as another column. And so in this way, it allows your content to be responsive and to display at an appropriate size for the device that's looking at it. Now, in addition, you can use CSS media queries. Does everybody know about CSS media queries? Yeah. So this allows you to write specific CSS for different, based on a query. So in the case of this top one here, I'm saying, okay, for this large desktop, I'm going to say at media min width of 1200 pixels. And then I can write all the CSS into that. So in my header, I may say, okay, I've got a logo, and then I've got some navigation links. And those navigation links, each one of them, it's an unordered list, and they're all 100 pixels wide or something. But when I'm in this larger layout, I can say, actually, each one of those list items are 120 pixels wide, and I can spread them out and make them a little bigger based on the bigger layout. And then I can also say, okay, but if I'm on the iPhone, I don't want to display them at all. And so I could say header ULLI, display none, or something like that. Or display as whatever, just change the display based on the layout for the device. So this begs the question, wouldn't it be cool if there were some helper classes that allowed you to display content based on a layout? And there is, yay. So you can say, there's all these helper classes that you can add to divs. Where this becomes really relevant is like headers and footers and different specific content pieces. Like you have this really pretty header that looks great on mobile, looks great on desktop, and it looks great on tablets, but you do not want or need that on a cell phone. So what you could do is, in theory, is you could build an entirely different header and then say, okay, this header is only for mobile layouts, and then just say, this is hidden on desktop and then hidden on tablet. And then it would only display that layout. And then to your normal header, you could say, this is visible desktop, visible tablet, but it's hidden on hidden on phone, and it'll just kind of dynamically figure out what the width is based on the CSS media query. It's kind of cool because it's doing all of this without JavaScript. So all of this so far, all of this media queries and everything that's done without JavaScript is based just on CSS. So super handy, very helpful. Okay, now, like Dave Weiner said, we need something like this, like these human interface guidelines, right? We need just something that sets the standard. So the first thing with Bootstrap is the typography. Looks very nice right out of the box. There's great, you can kind of go through the documentation and see a lot of things. I picked out like block quotes here. You know, this is the thing that just drives me crazy about developing WordPress themes. Like Chris was saying earlier, like I have a couple of themes in the WordPress repo, but I hate having to style every single element because they'll kick it back and say, well, you don't have a block quote styling inside of a paragraph. Like, well, yeah, okay, sorry, I forgot that. You know, like, but what Bootstrap gives you is a lot of things just styled right out of the box. Because you spend, like, when you start doing a new site or a theme, you're like, okay, well, I set everything to 0. I use Eric Meyer's CSS reset. Does everybody use that? You know. So you take and you do that, and then you set everything to 0, and you're like, crap, now I have to build out everything. I need to build out block quotes. I need to figure out what headings look like. I need to figure out sizes. I need to figure out colors for links. I need to do all of that. So Bootstrap kind of sets the standard for this. And I mentioned there's a customizer. If you go to twitter.github.com/bootstrap, and then you say customize, there's a customize button up at the top. You can say, okay, I want all of my links to be this color. I want all of my paragraph copy to be this color. I want my background color to be this color. And then just set it in some inputs and then hit customize. And it'll download the JavaScript and CSS based on what you're looking for. So it's super handy. Once again, tables. Like, who likes styling tables? Nobody does. So, but, you know, like they have a need. And so Bootstrap offers a ton of just default classes for tables. So this is the default one. As it looks right now, it has a border on the bottom of the TDs. But what you can do is you can add a couple of classes to your tables, and it offers a lot of different things. So you have table striped, table bordered, table condensed, table hover, and then to your rows or to your individual items, to your TDs, you can add success, error, warning, and info. And it'll offer background colors based on a bunch of different things like that. So just it's like, oh, sure, I'll put a table on this page for you because it will look okay. And I don't have to worry about making it look good, you know, just out of the box, because I build a lot of tables at work. For tabular data, not for layouts. Just okay. So there's also forms. Who likes styling forms? Nobody. So there's a ton of really cool standardized form options with Bootstrap. I add this here. There's a horizontal form that's not using tables. And this seems really cool to me. So, so you just add form horizontal to your form. It's a class you add to your form. And then you just kind of put everything in these little control group divs, and it just works. And then you say, oh, actually, I don't want a horizontal form. I want the labels and the inputs to be stacked. You just get rid of that class, and it goes back to that way. And these are really cool. They're responsive, and they just work. Who likes styling buttons? Nobody. Okay, so that's just the theme, I guess, of this talk is nobody likes to do work. And I guess we all like to do work. But we're lazy, right? You know, so like whatever we can get done easily for us. So, yeah. Sorry, I should have turned that off. Of course, whatever. Thanks, man. So if you add a class, btn, to an anchor tag, to a input, type equals button, or wait, what are they? Type equals, what's an input type? Just input type? Just submits and whatever, yeah. Yeah, not text, but yeah, the boxes, yeah. So you just have that class of button, and you get a nice looking little button. And then if you say, okay, but I want a blue button, you just say button and then button dash primary. So it's kind of namespaced like that. Green buttons, yellow buttons, red buttons. And then if you have like a button, like, you know, button, like remember old school buttons? You can actually say button and then button dash link, and it will just display it like a link instead, like an anchor tag rather than as a button, if you ever need to do that. So anchors, buttons, and input elements. Okay, another cool thing. There are icons, tons of icons. They're by a group called Glyphicons, and easy to use. What you do in your code here is you just say, Like in this case, this is kind of two examples here. This is a button group. So you can have buttons like this, right, as just individual buttons. But if you wrap them in a class called button-group, what it'll do is it'll scoot them together and then get rid of the like double borders, basically. So like this one doesn't have a left border and whatever. And so you just say button inside of a button group, and it gives you nice little stacked buttons. You can actually say button-vertical, and it'll give you vertical buttons, horizontal buttons, different things like that. Then with the icons, you just say I like old school italic, class equals icon dash align dash left. And so once again, kind of like namespace, you just say there's a whole list with an image of all of the different icons on the Bootstrap docs. And so you just say which icon you want, stick it inside as an I tag, and then it'll just work. And you get nice little buttons. There's everything. There's like sharing sharing icons and printing icons and all kinds of different things like that. So this is great, Jake, but what does it all mean? Like, how can I really use this? Now, this is where Bootstrap gets kind of cool, because including like all of these foundational things, there are also a lot of components that you can add into your site. And I was looking for a cool graphic for this slide, and this is the forward focus dual clutch transmission. That's cool. Okay, that's all. Okay, so we have buttons and we have drop-down menus. Wouldn't it be cool if we had split button drop-down menus? Yeah, totally, right? So we can use our buttons, and then inside of those just put an unordered list, and then that class is just drop-down menu, and it builds a drop-down menu for us under our button. And that's all you got to do. So, okay, now tabbable tabs. This is another like, once again, like, yes.
Are the drop-downs, are they JavaScript-based?
Yeah, these are now, sorry, yeah, good. Thank you for asking that. So now I'm getting into all of the JavaScript functions. So if you want this stuff now, you need to include that bootstrap.js file, or rename it whatever you want, put it on your server and link to it however you want. But yeah, these are all now JavaScript functions. But the cool thing about Bootstrap, and what I hope to kind of point out here, is that you do not need to know JavaScript to use these JavaScript plugins, which is why I love them. So I mean, I can make some drop-downs, maybe actually, yeah, whatever. But like, this is just like write some HTML, hook in some little data points, and that's all you have to do to like have a drop-down menu. So in this case, if we look at this code here, so we have this button, and we wanted to have this drop-down. So we have this extra little bit here. It says data-toggle equals drop-down. So what we're doing is we're saying to the JavaScript, hey, this isn't just a button. This is a drop-down button. So on that drop-down button, we say span class equals caret, and that's the little drop-down thing. And then we say, here's our unordered list. And right here in this class, we say drop-down toggle. And so it's going to be looking for this drop-down menu unordered list. Does that make sense a little bit? So you're doing JavaScript plugins without having to write any JavaScript, because all of the JavaScript is done for you. And there's a few more things. So in this case right here, this is tabbable tabs. How many times have you had to make tabbable tabs? You're like, OK, jQuery, hide this, and then show this, and then on this click function, do this. And you're like, hey, I made this nice little JavaScript function. Wouldn't it be cool if that was just built for you? Yes, and it is. So I want to show you some little code here. First off, does everybody use Sublime Text 2? OK, if you're not, you should be, because it's awesome. And I will show you why, because they have really great Bootstrap snippets. So I have a new window here. And I'm like, oh, I really wish that could have some tabbable tabs. So I just bring up my thing and I say tabbable tabs, Bootstrap tabbable navigation tabs. Boom, and there they are. Sorry, I get really excited by really stupid things. Like, hey, I didn't have to write 14 lines of code there. That just saved me a ton of time. There's a Bootstrap, and I have a link to it later in the presentation, but there's a Bootstrap snippets thing that you can add. Yeah, but it's like better. It's not better, I don't. Yeah, it's the same thing. Okay, so we have, if we look at our tabs here, we have these tabs up at the top, and then we have the content below, right? So we say this is our active tab, which draws the tab over it, right? And then we have the href points to a div that we want to display. And then the data toggle, we're saying, OK, this is a tab here. And then we say section 1, section 2, and then this one, number 2 right here, does not have the active tag on it. And then down here, here's our tab content. And so here's our first tab, so div class tab pane, and then active, and then the ID of 1, which references this button here. So I'm in section 1, howdy, I'm in section 2. So if you wanted to build, like a nice little Ryan Gosling tabbable thing, it would be really easy to do so. You would have to write like no lines of code and have programmer Ryan Gosling telling you how his heart belongs to you. Yeah. Hey, girl. All right. Yeah, okay. And I even wrote slides out here. This is what I meant to do. So tabbable tabs, food, co-op, right? Yeah, it's whatever. So you can, with these tabbable tabs, they don't have to be on top. They could also be on the side, top, right, bottom, or left. So you could build tabs at the bottom, or you could build tabs on the sides. Now, does this have to be tab content? No, like on mixing.com where I work, I use this same plugin to do our header navigation. So we had a main navigation where we said, link 1, link 2, link 3, and then it had a sub-navigation that showed up below it. And so then I just said, okay, well, tab that content in when you click this button, tab this content in when you do that. So this is totally expandable. It's awesome. Yeah, we'll just say it's awesome. Okay. Other little features, like badges here. Like, this is just one of those things, like, I hate having to style stuff like this, but it's just all built in. So you just say span class equals badge 1, and then you have nice little badges. And I'm kind of doing a couple of these things to lead up to, like, show how you could do. Wait, am I out of time in 10 minutes?
You have 10 minutes.
Holy cow. Okay, badges, pager, 26 out of 45 slides. I'm going to buzz through this real quick. Okay, there's, who likes styling this in WordPress? Nobody, but you have to do it on every single theme. So we can do like our WordPressified function of this and have nice little paginated next page, previous page links. We just say previous post link, next post link, and that's all we got to worry about. Okay, modal windows. Who likes writing modal windows? Nobody. WordPress or Bootstrap has it built in. They're really easy to launch. You just simply have an anchor tag that uses this data toggle. And it says, this is a modal window that we're launching when we click this button. What this does is what is it in JavaScript? Default, when you say don't do the default action, what do you know what I'm talking about? Huh? It's like prohibit default, something like that? Yeah, prevent default. So what we're saying here with this data toggle, like the first thing is like prevent default. Don't actually like link this, and then toggle the modal window that we're going to open. And the href here, this is the container of our modal window. And then here's the modal, div class modal, my ID, my modal, which is referenced right here, my modal. There's a nice little header, and then you can put your header, the body, and then there's a footer. And then notice here we have this data-dismiss. And what this is saying is whatever this link is, this will dismiss our modal window. So this is toggling our modal window in, and then our data dismiss is hiding our modal window. So once again, this is really cool because you don't have to write any JavaScript, but you can have really cool little JavaScript-y goodness on your website without having to do anything. Carousels, I could go on and on about carousels. Very similar. We just have a div called carousel and slide. And then you say what you want on the inside of it. Just stick it inside of a div. This can be all kinds of stuff. And then your nav right here. So we have, this is our JavaScript hook, data-slide previous, data-slide next, and that's all you have to do. Do you guys have something? No? Cool. Okay. So it's super easy to build a carousel. And like every person on their website is like, I want a carousel on the home page. Like, okay, I'll build one for you. And it'll be really easy to do. And I don't have to write any JavaScript. So, modals and carousels. Let's pretend this is an episode of Glee and mash this sucker up. Yeah, if we have any time. So, on Make, who works for a website or who builds websites where they want page views? Nobody? Like, what's the purpose of the internet? I'm sorry. So I work for Make Magazine where we make cool stuff and we talk about cool stuff. And so they said, hey, we really want to boost our page views. How can we do it without looking like we've sold out to the man? And so we said, well, we can do slideshows if they're really cool slideshows, right? And so we made this cool little slideshow thing. And if notice here, here's badges. And then here are these are the default previous and next selectors. And then I said, this is really kind of cool. So we'll do a blog post, and then we could link over to these slideshows. And then the people are like, yeah, that's cool, but nobody likes opening up another window. Like, well, how could we just load it inside of our same window? And I said, oh, I know what we could do. Like, here's a blog post about makes 3D print shop work again day 2. And then here's our day 2 slideshow. And we said, oh, well, we could just take and build a modal window and then load it in via an iframe. And then every single page is a different page view. And so, yeah, so everybody's really happy with that. So once again, though, really cool and no JavaScript. Well, actually, I had to write some JavaScript for this, but it's beside the point. Just pretend like there's no JavaScript. Let's see, back to this, and then slideshow. So who's using Bootstrap? Is anybody using it on production sites? A couple of people? Hey, we're using it at Make, and it's really awesome, but not responsive yet, so don't worry about it. The one cool use of Bootstrap is it's really good for admin themes. So at Make, we use a legacy Perl application that was developed by a bunch of people at O'Reilly a long time ago. And so someday we'd love to be off of our, it's called CS, our Perl thing. But in the meantime, like, I was tired of looking at these really antiquated admin screens, so I wrapped the whole thing in Bootstrap. And now I have an interface that's responsive, and it can be everything I want it to be, and it's, you know, and it's all, and it just works for me. This is a site called Percentage Calculator. There's a really cool site called Built with Bootstrap. If you're curious to see, this is just a really cool place where lots of people, you just submit your site and say, hey, this is what we do. There's also this Wrap Bootstrap. These are themes that are built on top of Bootstrap. So imagine the WordPress theme repository, but take out the WordPress, and you only want Bootstrap stuff, and that's what this is. So if you need like admin themes, or if you need a starter theme that you could WordPressify, there's a ton of really great themes in here. There's a lot of free ones. And then like, oh, here's a really nice admin theme for $18. You know, like, it's a good way to get started if you want to use Bootstrap. There's also Bootswatch, saving the web from default Bootstrap. What this is basically default styles to add to your Bootstrap theme. So you're like, say you're like me and you're using Bootstrap in your admin theme, but you haven't done anything to it. This makes it a little more beautiful to look at, I guess. There are a couple themes in the WordPress theme repository that are built with Bootstrap. There are 2 so far, but I think there's more. There's probably more, but they're just not saying this is a Bootstrap theme. And so, anyways. So there's a couple ways to get started. Like I said earlier, if you're using Sublime Text 2, or I think that there's other snippets out there for other editors, whether you're using TextMate or BBEdit or NetBeans or Coda or whatever. And there's also a really cool Bootstrap PSD. Does anybody know this person? Ben Peck? It says he's in Utah. Anybody know him? So he's got a Bootstrap theme that he did for Photoshop. And this is another one here. These are really cool. So you can say like, okay, here's the, all of these different content items. I need to see all of these menu items. I need buttons. So that you can actually like do a design before you start developing a website. It's kind of a foreign thing for me, but I guess other people do it. Let's see here. Also, little plug here, O'Reilly has a new Bootstrap book coming out. And the author is this really cool guy. The estimated release date is January 2013. I've got it due to the publisher in about a month and for technical edits. And yeah.
Will there be an early ebook?
There will be actually, like probably November-ish. I don't know who asked that, but November-ish there will be an early ebook. November 15th-ish, I would say, there will be an ebook.
Will it be on Safari Books?
It will be on Safari Books. But you guys should buy buy the ebook directly from O'Reilly. Anyways, that's it about Bootstrap. Thank you. Yeah, you guys are awesome. And thanks for Obama for being with us today. Anybody have any questions real quick? So yeah, that's really a good question. So when you have a full column width image, the way that Bootstrap CSS works is it says that images width are 100%, or wait, it's like width is 100%. And so what it says is if you are, let's say your column gets narrower, it'll go to 100% width of the column. So it'll just automatically shrink with the column.
But then you have the browser when you do a restarter.
Yeah, so it's not like, it's not gonna fetch an optimized image. It'll just fetch it'll just take the image that is embedded and then shrink it down. You make it the most appropriate, I think, for whatever layout you have, is what I would say. So like in this case right here, my little Ryan Gosling thing, notice as I make it narrower, did you see it jumped wider for a second, and then it'll just get narrower, but it'll fill the content of the.
So you do that in the HTML, which equals 100%?
No, that's just in Bootstrap CSS. You don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
So I have that floating header
Uh-huh.
on an edit page, and I have an image way too big, and I couldn't get this quite right because these are default that had a login.
Uh-huh.
I'm just wondering how do you deal with that header? Can you adjust the size?
Do you mean this top bar thing here?
Yeah, well, floating navigation. It's like in the default styles.
Uh-huh.
Bootstrap has 3 default styles along with that.
Yeah.
I call it floating header because if you move down the column,
Yeah. The top bar thing.
yeah.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But it's like it seemed like I could change the height of that. Do you have any advice?
Probably just some CSS fix. I'm not sure right away. Sorry.
Have you used the plugin, the Bootstrap plugin for WordPress?
I haven't, and the reason I haven't is we just have everything kind of custom. So I'm sure it's great and works great, but I haven't.
Does it have any interference with like the jQuery UI stuff?
It shouldn't, and well, I mean, it could. You know, like that's the thing when you start mixing JavaScript frameworks. It could, but it shouldn't. So I don't know.
And does it fall, I mean, all those data tags are HTML5 specific, so what happens?
Well, so I think the way that those really work is whenever you have an attribute, it's just an unnamed attribute. So like if you put it through some validator, like the W3C validator would probably say these are just blank attributes. They're not recognized as like title or source or anything like that. But then in JavaScript, you can just say, hey, find this attribute that matches this. So
But, I mean, but do they think about accessibility and is that something that?
I would assume, I don't know if I can speak to that. Sorry. I think that they are. And I know what you mean by saying jQuery versus the $sign, and I think they are. I haven't delved into the code why.
Can you quickly, I love this Bootstrap stuff. Can you not go back, but just tell me again, refresh my memory, how do you get Bootstrap into WordPress?
So
Getting that Bootstrap thing, how do you get it?
there's in the beginning I showed, you just hook in, there's a CSS, at a minimum there's a CSS file, and if you want the JavaScript plugins, there's a JavaScript file that you include. And so that's the CSS I'd put up in the header, like header.php, and then the other one I'd put in the footer. The JavaScript I'd put in the footer. And that's it, yeah. Or what you do is you say, like I did in slide like 6 or something. And you can enqueue it. And this is a WordPress function that it'll say, basically find, just hook in those files automatically. And based on dependencies too. So you need to have jQuery for the JavaScript. So it'll make sure that you have make sure that you have jQuery included, and it'll include the Bootstrap JavaScript.
Both 3 files roughly,
Yeah.
and then reference them.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all.
Yeah, so like this, yeah, it's this right here. So you just include the CSS and then the JavaScript. Yeah, that's all you gotta do. All right, thanks.